Hey, welcome. This is the Real Estate Investing Mastery Podcast. Good morning, wherever you are. Hope you're doing well. I'm excited about this show because we've got a guy on. His name is Mark Monroe, and I've seen him a lot in Facebook. He's an active investor, and he has a really, really interesting story. He's got a story of a tenant who stole his lockbox, got the code to get in the house, moved in, and it took Mark 6 months to get the guy out. And so we're going to be talking about this story. More importantly, we're going to be talking about what he could have done to avoid it. What could he have done differently where this wouldn't have happened? And I think he might even tell a story of a tenant who took a shotgun to his house. So we'll see how bad that gets. But this is a Deals Gone Bad series. And sometimes somebody said once, smart people learn from their mistakes. Wise people learn from the mistakes of others. And so on this podcast series, I've got about 20 or 25 lined up. This is number 14 with Mark. But I'm trying to share stories of things that have gone bad. Not everything is all rose-colored and blossoms or whatever, right? Like this business is a tough business. It's a very profitable business. But you'll notice every single one of our guests has not quit. They've not given up. They've persevered through these challenges and have thriving, successful businesses today. And I think this is going to be really helpful. I'm getting a lot of really good feedback from this. Also, we are live right now on YouTube and Facebook. Like Marco, what's going on, Marco? There he is. Good morning, everyone. Hey, Marco. So if you are watching this live right now on Facebook and YouTube, please type something in the comments. Say hello. Tell us where you're from. Give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Would you? I'd really appreciate it. If you're listening to this on audio podcast, subscribe to Apple Podcasts, leave a review. I'd appreciate it. So, one more thing here before we go. I've been collecting all of the notes, and we're going to be putting them together into a book. And if you text the word bad to 313131 or go to joemccall.com/bad, you can get all of the notes and the references and the links and the lessons learned from all of our guests on this podcast series. And right now they are in a mind map. Pretty soon we'll be putting them into like a resource, a PDF or a book or something like that. And but if you want first dibs at it, if you want to get the raw notes as I'm actually live right now typing them in, then just text the word bad to 313131 or go to joemccall.com/bad. Cool. All right. So I'm going to bring on Mark. Mark, how are you?
Hey, Joe, I'm doing well. And yourself?
Really good. A little under the weather.
Yeah.
I got a stuffy nose and cold, so I apologize if I'm not my own normal.
You didn't get the COVID thing, did you?
I don't know. I got a test the other day. So stupid. It's a freaking fraud. But don't get me started.
I'm going literally down here. I've known about 30 people that's all had it, and every single one's been fine. One of them had like a pretty bad flu for about like 5 days, but everybody else just lost their taste and they had a migraine for a few days. I'm a lot better today than I was a few days ago. So things are a lot better. But I'm just frustrated with this whole stupid thing. We're almost over. You know, we had they announced this past week. They have a vaccine that's 90% ready to go. So
well, they're also saying there's more shutdowns coming ahead.
Yeah.
So this is not the place to talk about that because we're here to talk about real estate and we're here to talk about deals gone bad. So Mark, give us a little history of you. Where are you now, and what kind of deals do you do?
So I've been, I'm going to show my age here. I got into real estate banking back in 1995 up in the Washington, D.C. area. And we ended up, a couple of my guys, we ended up starting our own mortgage company up there, and we ended up blowing it up. God, I was in my 20s at that time, making disgusting amount of money for my age. And you're young and stupid and you don't think the money's ever going to run out. And I'm like, I'm going to leave that and go try something different. I'm making great money. And, you just kind of live and learn. So I've been in the real estate banking game for a long time. Then in 2008, the crash happened and we kind of shifted over to doing some loan modifications. What made us different than everybody else is we actually hired mortgage underwriters. And then I don't remember if you remember Linton Loans. They reached out to us and then we were doing their overflow on the back end. And then regulations came down and then you had to be a law firm. So we sold that off. Then we got into doing the lead generation. And I've been generating leads, for mortgage with clients like Quicken Loans, Bank of America, Solar City, thousands of attorneys. So we had that for quite some time.
So
And
doing lead generation, is that what you said?
Yeah, we did lead gen. So we literally had clients, Quicken Loans, Bank of America, Penny Mac. I don't know if you know Penny Mac. They used to be the old Countrywide people now. They just kind of reorganized. So that was kind of my background. But throughout the years, I've always been doing lease options was my go-to. I did that way back in the late 90s. Followed Wendy Patton. I learned her course. She was great. So when I was during a time period, I kind of stepped back and I was just kind of doing loans for myself. And I had a little niche at that time. So I'd find sellers that wanted to sell their home, but they couldn't sell to move on. So what I'll do is I'll go in, refinance their property down to like the rates at that time were like 7-8% maybe. Refinance it, brought it down to like a 2-year arm. Hey, I'll take over your property. I'll do a lease option on it. So I refinanced it, made money off that loan. Oh, by the way, your new home, I want to do that loan. And then I did the lease option. So in one lead, I got 3 different transactions out of it back in the day. So it worked out really well. And then I got recruited by a national company to go to buy subprime mortgages from North Carolina down to my Florida. So I was always out there meeting with banks, buying all their mortgage subprime paper back in the day. So that's kind of a little bit about my background. And since the COVID thing hit, I just pretty much went back into, I had another business that we did small business lending, like hard money lending and merchant cash advance. So I had that for a few years with my other partner. I said, hey, you know what? I'm moving on to something different. I'm at a different age. I want to slow down and start enjoying life a little bit more. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So you're doing on average how many deals a month right now? Flipping them?
Yeah, last month I did 11 deals.
Good for you, man.
Yeah, and I really just want to do probably, I don't want to blow up another business. I've built businesses, done it, I'm tired. I just really now I want to probably stay between like 3 to 5 deals a month. Yeah. But for some reason now, I'm just getting referrals, people bringing deals to me. Because I do, lease option is one of the tools in my tool belt. I do the wholesaling, I do the owner financing stuff too. So I know all that type of situation. So, since COVID's here, I'm always just kind of work, I'm stuck at home.
And you're in Florida, right?
Yep.
Florida?
Yeah, Boca Raton, South Florida, near Fort Lauderdale.
And where do you do most of your deals? Where do you focus?
I originally started in, originally was my backyard. But then I started doing some virtual wholesaling and that's where this deal came about, my first learning mistake. So when I went to do virtual, so now I do Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and I have a couple up in Vermont right now as well. So usually I'm partnering up with other investors and they're bringing deals and I'm kind of helping them structure and we're kind of doing some splits like that.
Cool. So what's your favorite way to bring down deals, to
it really comes down to the seller, figuring out the seller's needs, what they're looking for, what they're trying to accomplish. That's really what it comes down to. I'll look at anything as long as it makes sense. That's kind of what my thought process and my approach is.
All right. So, but when you buy a house, you'll try to buy it with subject to or owner financing or lease option?
I feel very comfortable with lease options. I just known it for years. It's just my go-to, mainly, especially if they're a retail seller and they can't carry the mortgage. That's usually, those are the easiest deals for me, at least, the lease options. But I will do a sub to, depending on the situation or a contract.
That's a good question I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
It kind of relates to what we're going to be talking about too. Like, when do you choose to do a lease option on a deal where you're just leasing it with the option to buy? And when do you choose to do a subject to take over the mortgage on the deal?
It depends how much money I have to come out of pocket.
Okay.
If I had I just did one where she was behind in the mortgage. I had to bring her mortgage current. She needed money to move. So I gave her $10,000 to move. I had to put in, I'm into that one for probably about $22,000, $23,000. So that one, I want to have some collateral against the property. If I'm not putting much up and just doing like first month, last month security, then I'll tend to do like a lease option. It really depends on the situation and like the seller, how, like what they need out of it. If a seller is just, wants to downsize and they want to move on and they don't feel comfortable transferring the property, whatever, I'll just do a lease option on it.
Do you feel like there's less risk to you, the investor, when you buy it on a lease option?
100%. If you're doing the sub to, you need to make sure that you have 6 months reserve. Because if they default, you got to evict them. You got to make sure you're the one that keep paying the mortgage. You're responsible for that. Lease options is worst cases you're giving that property back to the owner and they're taking that property back, especially when you're going into these type of times coming up. I prefer lease options because of the risk factor. Yeah. And if the market changes, it's an option. You can kind of walk away from it.
I've been saying that a lot. It's the ownership, the control without ownership, isn't it?
Right.
And I've always preferred that. When I've only gotten in trouble when I've owned too much, and I had too much debt in my name and too much liability and too much risk.
Yeah. And if the seller is okay doing some type of creative financing, if they only want to do it short term and they want the money out, I'm going to always go to a lease option, because if the market corrects, I want a minimum of 5 years to be able for that market to kind of correct and come back. Otherwise, I'm going to always go to a lease option because it's a shorter term that it's less risky.
I think it's also less risk to the seller too.
Absolutely.
You were in the mortgage business. There is always that risk that a bank could call a loan due on a subject to.
Absolutely.
I remember talking one time to a guy who worked at City Mortgage, and he was working in I forget what department it was, but basically he was telling me what he does, and he gets notified whenever there's a red flag that happens, and he digs in and investigates what's going on. It could be insurance changed, taxes haven't been escrowed properly, and I said, have you ever heard of like subject to buying houses subject to? And he goes, oh yeah, we sure have. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. I said, what do you think? What do you know about it? And he said, well, we know it happens. And he knew I was an investor. He said, we know you investors do it. He said, but bottom line, we're so busy, we can't do anything about it, except when you do something stupid and you raise the red flag, which is so easy to do.
It is.
He said, if the insurance isn't right, if it's not in the right names, and all that, if there's ever any kind of hint of late payments, or if you get late, that just makes everything worse. And he said, but be careful, he said, because if the market starts turning around and interest rates start going up, right, you've got all these loans at 2 to 3%. If rate starts going up to 5-6%, I think the banks are going to be as quick to overlook those. Just, you know what I mean? So anyway, let's talk about this deal, Mark.
Sure.
How long ago was this?
This was just the beginning of COVID, when COVID started hitting. Yeah. So I would say, early March, late February, early March. It was my first deal that I was kind of doing virtually. It was probably about 3 to 4 hours from me. And, somebody that I know is an investor. He lives in Florida. He does everything up in Ohio. So he goes, just send somebody out to the property, do a walkthrough, take pictures, do an inspection, and have them put the lockbox on.
This one's in Ohio?
Correct. Well, that's what he does. This property was here in Florida. It was northern Florida, and I'm down here in southern Florida. So it was about 3 to 4 hour drive. So he said, I just give him a lockbox. I tell him to take a photo of the driver's license, send it to me, and I give him the code, and they go walk through, and they tell me when they leave. So I'm like, okay. So he was kind of coaching me through how he does his virtual wholesaling, if you will. So I had this, probably gave it out to about 5-7 people, the code, and they went through, and this one couple went in, liked the property. He said he'll get back to me, he's interested. So what happened was this was like on I think a Thursday or Friday. And I had another couple getting ready to go out and look at the property the following Wednesday. And they said, the door, we can't get in. The lockbox gone, and this car isn't a car. And I went and knocked on the door, and there's people living in the property. I'm like, what? There's people living there. So, I started doing some research. And what happened was, it was the couple that went to view the property. They went in on a Saturday afternoon, unlocked, and just moved everything right into the house and started living into the property. So then we hired an attorney. We started going through the eviction process. And then sure enough, in about the second or third weekend, then COVID hit, and then they just froze all evictions. So then I couldn't do anything.
Didn't they freeze evictions for people who couldn't pay rent because of loss of income from COVID?
That's how I finally got them out. But in the beginning, they just froze everything.
It didn't matter that they were
It
there
didn't matter.
fraudulently.
Yeah. So yeah, that's how it was in the beginning in the state of Florida. It was just so we couldn't do anything. The courts weren't even open because of
Yeah, the
COVID.
courts
Everything's
were closed.
completely shut down. The sheriffs weren't, even if the court was open, the sheriffs weren't serving because everybody, it's that stage
Yeah.
of when everything was completely locked down. So we finally, after months and months, my attorney, we had to he had to dig up and show that this gentleman did not get any type of income loss at all whatsoever. So we had to present that to the judge. We actually did a court hearing right on Zoom. That's pretty wild. So it's a judge, my attorney, myself, and then the tenant. So
the tenant even showed up, and they had the gall to even show up in the court.
Well, what he tried doing, he tried to say that the property wasn't up to code. So when he went in there, he started taking photos of the smoke detector and like a broken window, whatever it was. So he was trying to use that. Hey, the property wasn't up to code. I had to put all this money into the property. Meanwhile, the rent on that, he owed about $12,500.
And he had zero lease. He didn't have a signed lease or anything.
No.
Did the judge laugh at him, hopefully, or like?
It's just like, no, because how he put everything in, like he did it in an LLC or whatever, all the bills and everything. So they were trying to say, in the state of Florida, if you're like an LLC, then you have to have an attorney representing you. So it's going to stall it another. So this guy knew the system. He was playing the system. So he knew how to install and kept pushing it out further and further. But the judge finally, we finally got him out. So
did the judge award damages?
No, because how he did it, he has everything in an LLC. So I couldn't get anything out of it. I mean, I could possibly, turn it over to collections. Maybe that might be an option.
Oh, 100% it's an option.
Yeah.
And you should, because that attaches to his credit. And if anybody does a background check on him, that judgment shows up. You can garnish his wages. You can hire an aggressive collection agency to go after him, follow him. And that collection, I've done this before. And it's amazing how well it works. And it may take a couple, 3 years, but it'll always be following that guy. You get an aggressive collection agency, and they will follow him whenever he gets a job or gets any kind of paycheck or gets a checking account. They will garnish the wages and take it to pay that judgment. And he'll pay you interest during this whole time, attorney's fees, collection fees. And you may never get it, but it makes his life a lot more difficult to get any kind of credit for cars or appliances or a house. I've done this before to a tenant, and he owed me maybe 3 months of lost rent, which was only at maybe $2,000 or something like that. But he owed me $5,000 from interest and attorney's fees and collection agency fees. The collection agency kept 50% of whatever they collected, but I didn't care. Not that I'm vengeful, but the guy stole money from me and he took advantage of me.
Oh, and the place got destroyed. There's probably I think there's another $3,500 on top, and the attorney fees on top of it. It dragged on.
So even though you may think this is a lesson learned for everybody, I think, even though you may not ever think you'll ever collect the guy because he put it in an LLC, but you can sue anybody, no matter if they're hiding behind an LLC or not. You can name them. You can name their LLC and you can name their individual personal name. And if a judge rules in your favor and you get a judgment, they get all of your attorney's fees, the penalties, the interest, and the damages and the lost rents and all of that. And a good aggressive a collection agency, they love working with guys like you because you're giving them permission to pursue this guy. And this guy that worked for me, man, he'd update me once a month. He was a private investigator. He would do skip tracing. He knew the phone numbers of this guy's mother, his brothers, his sisters, his cousins. He was constantly calling the guy, harassing him, mailing him, contacting his employer, contacting his bank accounts. I felt kind of bad for the guy, but you know what? He called me after about 3 years and said, listen, I'm trying to buy a house. Can I just settle this?
Oh, wow.
And I did negotiate. When he finally reached out to me, I said, all right. And I did negotiate a settlement with him. And then he got it wiped off and he was able to buy his house. But
interesting. Oh, that's so What's a good way to find a good aggressive collection? If anybody's watching this, if they know, just put a note in there. I'd love to know.
I found this guy, and this has been about 10 years, from a referral from a property manager, I think is what it was.
Okay.
No, you know what I did? This is what I did. I called, because I needed to evict him. I called the largest property management company in St. Louis. I asked them, who do you use for your evictions? Because I wanted the one eviction attorney. When he brings a case to the judge knows this guy. He sees him all the time. He just pretty much rubber stamps, that kind of an attorney, right? And this guy does 20, 30 evictions a week, right? I got this guy. The property management company told me, listen, he's really good at what he does, and he knows what he's doing. Give him whatever he asks for, and don't bug him. Don't call him and ask him, and he'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. So I gave him everything he needed and he wanted, and he said, okay, I'll take care of it. 3 weeks later, I didn't hear from him, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know what to do. Should I call him? And the other property management company said, leave him alone. And then sure enough, I got a phone call from his assistant. All right, it's done. We got a judgment and it's eviction, and the tenants moved out, and he took care of everything. And then I asked him, I said, well, who do you recommend for a collection agency? And he recommended this guy.
Okay.
And he was a local St. Louis guy, and I don't even know if I could find his name and number anymore.
It's good to know. I'm sure.
Talk to big property management companies. Ask them who they recommend or who they use for evictions. You want the best attorney that just does most of the evictions in that county, and then ask him who do they use for collections.
Got it. I should probably even ask the attorney that did the eviction for me.
I would. Oh yeah. I mean, this guy needs to learn his lesson, in my opinion. He's done it to other people. He'll do it to more. He needs to be stopped. And one of the ways is just aggressive collection agency tactics. Yep. And I've been the recipient of those aggressive collections. When the market crashed and I lost everything, man, those guys had no mercy on me. They called me. They called my wife. They called me at home. They called me at work.
You're going to jail.
Well, they never threatened me with jail. It was never that bad.
They used every tactic.
Oh, yeah. And, I remember, though, that's a long story. I won't go into it. I had to beg them, please stop calling me at home. You're waking up my little kids who are trying to, my wife's at home.
Oh. Yep. So I definitely learned some lessons from this.
Depressing.
Wow.
But this is a good lesson learned, I think, for everybody listening to this, because don't let these guys walk over you. There's people who game the systems like this, and they may have done it in an LLC, but you can still sue them personally. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever been served a lawsuit before, but
during businesses,
they will name you, your nicknames, your middle names, your LLCs, all of the other related LLCs. They'll name, if this is something that happened to me. I wasn't involved in the deal, but I kind of was, but it was someone else's deal. They went through in that lawsuit and named everybody involved in the transaction: the leasing agent, the property management company, the people who own the property management company, the investors, the private investors, I was like kind of a partner with the guy who owned the property. Anyway, they named everybody. And when you do a lawsuit, you can name anybody you want. Doesn't matter if they did it in an LLC or not. There's no corporate veil. It can be pierced anytime somebody does something illegal. And that's what this guy did. And I think it would be easy to prove.
Was it a real lawsuit or was it a shakedown?
It was a shakedown.
Yeah, I had one of those.
They just were shaking to see what would fall.
Yeah, I had one where literally it cost us, I think, almost like $37,000. It was just crazy. So what happened was, a lot of people probably don't know this, but if you send somebody to your website, right, and they fill out a form, and they, they're on the DNC, but they're opting in. In some states, they have to re-opt back in after 30 days. If not, you're violating the DNC. And that
for cold calling and texting.
So there's an attorney out there, and this is what he specializes in. And he was just shaking it down. That's all he was doing.
Well, there's a lot of companies that do that, especially in Florida right now.
Yeah.
You got to be super careful with ringless voicemail and texting, because they're just sending threatening lawsuit letters and to get you to settle. And
Yep, they just look at it and they're like, oh, so my partner just bought this beautiful home in this nice area, and he's sitting there, during dips. Oh, I see, you just bought this beautiful home in such and such community. You guys must be doing really well. You just knew it was just a shakedown all the way, and he was just gonna drag it out.
Well, all right. So you got this tenant out. They damaged the property. What did you do then? Did you fix it up?
Yeah, just fixed it up and just turned around and got somebody back into the property. And so it was a big learning mistake on my part. I was just, I think we actually had a discussion several months ago. You were doing one of your coaching calls or something like that. I came on, you and Gavin, and we were talking about it at one time, and just pretty much learn, like, going forward, always use a realtor showing the properties. Let them go in and show the properties. That's probably one of the biggest things. It's so worth paying a realtor their amount of money. The amount of money that I end up losing on this compared to just paying 1 month's rent up front, by far, that's the biggest thing. The second biggest thing is because the property was sitting a little bit and I was getting antsy, so I was just grabbing the first one that supposedly, well, actually, I didn't even grab him. He just kind of went into the property. So that was probably, I think the biggest one is definitely using a realtor when you're doing stuff virtually. That's that's how I shifted the whole process. And my buddy that he uses it, he said he's never had a problem with it. But, it was a lesson, and it's just so much easier now. I have to worry about it and just let the realtor handle everything.
I used to do that a lot with properties, even that were close to me. I would give the lockbox code away.
Yep.
And the worst thing that ever happened to me was somebody stole my staging. So I had, I don't know, that wasn't much, $500, $700 in staging, like towels and decorative candles and stuff like that. But that sucked. You feel violated. Somebody, but a lot of people do that. And sometimes people look at it as it's a risk worth taking because it saves them the time of going to the house and showing it all the time.
Yeah.
When you can just give the lock. But it sounds like you did the right things. Did you get their phone number? Did you get the copy of their driver's license?
Oh, yes, I had it all. They definitely had it, and it was them. It was all their contact information. He just knew the system. He worked it. Come to find out, he was actually he went around and inspect rentals for the county. For the violation. For, I guess you need a rental certification in that area.
Yeah. So he worked for the county.
Yeah. Well, he was a subcontractor for the county.
Oh wow.
So he definitely knew how to work that system really well. So, and I was just shocked. And then, by the way, he actually, with a neighbor, got into it with a neighbor. With the neighbor, actually had to file a restraining order on this guy during that time period. So it was just.
During this time, you were still paying the mortgage on it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You kept the mortgage current. You took care of the seller, which is good, awesome, good for you for doing that.
You have to.
And then you still have the property.
Yes. Yep.
If COVID wouldn't have happened, do you think it would have been easier to get the guy out? Yeah,
we probably would have had him out in about 45 days, the attorney said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what he said. It was just, the timing was just unbelievable.
So that's a huge lesson learned when you're selling properties. And this could be for lease options or owner financing or cash deals or when you're selling properties, use realtors. I don't know why people are so afraid to pay for that or don't want to, but it just makes such perfect sense.
Yep. Then I had you want to hear about my other one I had? My one where the guy took a shotgun to...
real quick.
Real quick. So I had a property, this was many, many years ago, about a fourplex up in New England, in Vermont, small little town. And that's kind of where I grew up, but I've been down here. Actually, the funny thing is I played football with Sean Terry back in the day.
You did, really?
Yeah. He was, we're rivals. He was from the next town over. So it's kind of small, kind of funny.
How about that?
Yeah. So anyways, what happened was I didn't know this. I would never end up doing something. First of all, fourplex. I only do beautiful homes in nice areas now. And you always say that. So the key to it is always make sure your tenant that you put into the properties are always the good tenants of whoever's buying the property. That's the key to all headaches, and making sure they're putting a reasonable amount of money down, because if they have something on the line, they're kind of concerned about losing money. Anyways, this guy, I had a property manager. He put somebody into the property. Come to find out, this guy was kind of dealing drugs out of the unit. It was a fourplex. So somebody moved out, and then he was trying to show the property to somebody else to fill up the other unit. He stopped paying, by the way, the one that was in the property. So we're trying to get him out. Then the other people moved out. Every time we went to show the property to a new tenant, he would come out, yell, scream, so nobody wanted to live there. So then another person moved out. So out of a fourplex, I only had one person paying the rent, and nobody else was paying it. And what happened was, up there at the time in the state of Vermont, from I think the end of November to the end of March, you can't evict during the wintertime. And I did not know this. So this guy knew the system. So what happened was the property manager knew the town or the city, and he had other properties. So we took the one tenant, moved her into another place. So now the place is completely empty. And he actually was friends with the city that ran the water. So we said, hey, we're not paying the water bill. So they condemned the building to get the guy out. And then he took a shotgun and just shot the whole inside of the place all up.
Wow. And then what'd you do?
Insurance covered it, but I was like, I didn't collect anything for a while. So I learned my lesson never to do, like, I don't like, duplex, triplex, fourplex. I don't like those. I prefer bigger multifamily, but I always rather stick with nice residential homes in nice areas. It's just less headaches.
All right. So here's lessons learned that I've typed up so far. Number one, always use a realtor to show your properties. Pay them 1 month's rent. It's not a big deal, right?
Yep.
Don't give the lockbox code out. Always make sure you really pre-screen good tenants for your properties. Do a full pre-screening background check, right? Don't just take the first one who expresses interest or even who has the money, right? Or who, I'm writing that down, who even has the money. You want to make sure you take somebody that puts a good deposit down on the property, but has a clean background check, who passes the mustard, whatever that means.
Yep.
And you avoid renting crappy properties. Stick with nice homes in nice areas.
Yep. And I would always recommend using an RMLL for underwriting your buyers to make sure they can qualify. That's huge.
Always use a licensed mortgage originator or broker.
Yeah.
A licensed mortgage broker to review your tenant buyers.
Yeah, absolutely. To make sure they can definitely qualify.
Yep. Very good. Because you want to make sure, I'm writing this down.
Yeah. I had one recently, just real quick. I had this gentleman, a lease option property, that he was a roofer. He owned a roofing company. And on that particular deal, I was looking for first month, last month security and like 3% of the option fee down. So it was like about $10,500. And this one guy, they went and looked at it. They really, really wanted this property so bad, but he did everything under the table. And he wanted it so bad, he was willing to double. He was willing to put $25,000 down, but he did everything under the books. And I knew, and we sent him through the RMLO, and the guy, we told him, hey, you have 3 years to, show your income. And the guy didn't want to do it. So what happened was I ended up turning that guy down, even though he had $25,000. I ended up going with somebody else that only had $8,000 to put down, and we ended up putting them on a payment plan because they were showing the income. So, you always want to use an RMLO just for that reason.
A licensed mortgage broker is going to tell you, yeah, they can get a mortgage if they do this and this and this over the next 2 or 3 years. Correct. And you want to make sure that they have good debt to income ratio. They don't have stupid things on their credit that can't be fixed. You want to make sure they don't have a $5 million tax lien in their name, because they'll never get a mortgage, right? You got to make sure they don't have $500,000 in unpaid child support or alimony.
For me, that's key. I want to make sure who I'm putting in that property is definitely getting a loan. So I always make sure that like this guy, I knew he could pay it. I knew he had a down payment, but I know at the end of 3 years, he wasn't going to be able to get a loan. So and that's key to me. Like, hey, I want to get my other capital out on the back end of that, but also to make sure that, it's a win for everybody, win for the seller, win for the buyer. And also we make a little bit of money on the deal. That's
great. Good, Mark. This has been a good podcast. I sure appreciate you being on. How can people reach you if they want to get a hold of you?
They can look for me on Facebook. I also have a pretty large group out there, Creative Real Estate Investing. Just look for that group. They can join there, or just hit me up on LinkedIn, Instagram. But usually the group is pretty good. And
I'm writing this down here.
I'm sorry?
I'm writing this down here to put on the thing. There you go. There's a Facebook group called Creative Real Estate Investing. Is that right?
Correct.
Good. Look for the group. Join it. You're active in there. I've seen a lot of activity. It's a good group. Mark, good, man.
Appreciate
you very much. Thanks for being on the podcast. And guys, don't forget, if you want the notes and the list of all of the lessons learned from Mark and the other people that we've interviewed for this podcast series, go to joemccall.com/bad or text the word bad to 313131. And yeah, we'll see you guys later. Thanks, Mark. We'll see you.
Appreciate it.